What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Severe MMA preview show. Paul Browne here, and we are on the precipice of a massive afternoon stroke evening of fights this weekend. The Bellator / PFL Road to the Bite Champion Series is going down, and it's got a heavy Ireland v Dagestan flavour to it. I'm going to talk you through the card. I'm going to give you my thoughts on each of the individual fights. Well, the ones on the main card at least. And let's have a little chat about how we think the fights might shape out. So let's begin with the main event, of course. The biggest fight of Paul Hughes' career, and the fights have been coming thick and fast for him, the big ones over the last while since he left Cage Warriors not even a year ago now at this point. I think it was April, May, wasn't it, last year when he finished up with Cage Warriors? So, you know, it's been a hell of a journey for him. He kicked off in the Bellator cage with that impressive win in the 3 Arena in Dublin over Bobby King. And then he managed to get that big fight that he was looking for. The one he wanted at the time when he beat Bobby King, I remember him telling me after the fight, was he wanted to call out Usman Nurmagomedov, but Usman had already been matched by that point. So I believe he was banging down the doors of anyone who would listen in the PFL offices, Mike Cogan and all those guys involved in the matchmaking, and begging for the fight against Usman from day one. That he sees that as his opportunity to prove to the world just how good he is. And you know, he got the next best thing. He got the fight against AJ McKee, which took place in Saudi Arabia, and he went into that one as probably a sizable underdog, which he will again this weekend, and he proved everybody wrong. You know, silenced all the critics, and he kind of really opened a lot of eyes. I mean, I would always have big faith in Paul Hughes, having seen him close up and seen him in action, those big fights he had in Cage Warriors. But we all realised that AJ McKee fight was a step up in competition. But I mean, you know, that was a pretty comfortable victory for him in the end. It didn't look like a split decision. I know it was officially down as a split decision, but you know, you can question one of those scorecards really on that one, because for me, he looked in control of that fight at all times, almost finished the fight, and he really let the world know just who he is and where his level is at least to some extent. We're going to find out now this coming weekend. You know, can he make that leap up to the next level? So it's a fascinating fight, and there's a lot of nuance at play here, especially coming off the back of UFC 311, where Usman's brother, Umar's the older brother, I believe, and you know, he came in at 18-0, just like Usman will this weekend, and he was upset. You know, he was coming in there as a strong favourite against Merab Dvalishvili, that was mind-blowing to me, really. You know, if you guys listened to the Severe MMA preview show last week, we talked about that. But I mean, the fact that Merab came into that one, you know, as such a sizable underdog, we were all a little taken aback at that one. And you know, we proved to be right, really, because Merab has been there, done it, and beat many champions in the UFC, whereas I know Umar's coming in there unbeaten, but you know, he had only fought really one top tier opponent in that bantamweight division. So we look at Usman this weekend, who, you know, I know they're brothers and they have similarities in how they fight, but they are not strictly the same fighter. Usman, like I said, coming in at 18-02. But let's talk about what he brings to the table and where the fight might take place, really, what you know, how it might look when it all happens. It's a 5-rounder. So the first thing that's going to have to happen is someone is going to have to establish which range the fight takes place at. And I think that's going to be the biggest battle of the fight. Now, what Usman does really well, slightly different to his brother Umar, is he switches stances quite a bit, and you'll see a lot of his work coming out of the orthodox stance. His brother switches stances a bit, but fights mostly out of southpaw. Usman can do both, but he won't be maybe as heavily favoured on one side. Like, he will switch maybe a little bit more than his brother does. But generally, orthodox is where he will be. Maybe that will be his home base. And I think that plays into Paul's hands in one respect, in that Paul is very good at squaring up his stance a little when he does get into that boxing range. And the likes of his left hooks to the body, that sort of 45-degree angle shovel uppercut kind of hook to the body, the kind of Canelo style punch. It's beautiful. It's one of his best shots. He gets a lot of whip, a lot of torque in those shots. But the question for me, like I mentioned, is if Paul can get into that range, because Usman, he has a style that's very good at not really allowing people to fight in that range. So I heard a great line from his coach, Liam Shannon, on, I think it was was he on the Severe, episode 500 of the Severe MMA podcast, or it might have been the L Triangle. But what he said was, and this stuck with me, he said, Usman is one of the best fighters in the world at, not wanting to get into a fight, or something to that effect. I might be paraphrasing there, but what he meant by that is, Usman fights on the outside, and he doesn't really want to get down deep down and dirty in close range with guys. So what he does is he uses really good long range weapons. He's got a really good jab, and these type of weapons that he has, they're much better than those of his brother. Really good long straight shots, the jabs, the 1-2s, and then high kicks and things like that. We saw when he dropped Benson Henderson with that question mark kick. He's got real style and panache, but also that bit of venom in his kicks. So that's where he kind of thrives. And what he does then is he entices people, or he picks people off a little bit from there, and he kind of forces them to maybe force the issue and crash into the space. But he doesn't engage with them there in a boxing sense. What he does is, the moment you crash that space, he changes levels and tries to get to the floor, to the mat, take that momentum off you as you're driving towards you. So that'll be the challenge for Paul. Can he break into that space without getting taken down? We did see excellent grappling defense against AJ McKee, and AJ McKee is one of the best, most dangerous grapplers in the world of mixed martial arts. So that kind of bodes well, and it's in one respect, it's Paul can probably kind of hang his hat on that and say, well, look, I've done it against a guy that's kind of a very high level submission grappler. I think Usman is slightly better than him in that respect. Another thing that Usman does is he comes in a little bit differently on those takedown attempts than AJ McKee does. AJ McKee would literally drop levels right on that centre line and crash into the hips. Usman kind of swerves a little, and his head will dip off the centre line, like he'll go to one hip, but his legs will be out the side of your other hip, and he'll crash sideways into you to catch you. He'll wrap to the waist that way. So maybe the same weapons that Paul Hughes was using against AJ McKee, like that knee up the middle, may not be as effective in this fight in that instance when you're trying to time it to stuff a takedown. But it's difficult to know. So I think that's where the real battle for control and dominance will take place, and there's a very, very real chance that we could go all 5 rounds here. I mean, both of these guys are super high level. As I mentioned, Usman coming in 18-0, and particularly now his last few fights. I mean, last time out when he came back after his can we call it a drugs ban? It was, he got a 6-month ban, didn't he? And it was kind of negotiated into a sort of a suspended sentence, if you will, when he kind of convinced the California State Athletic Commission that whatever he popped for, that it was medicinal. So questionable stuff with the CSAC there, but he did look very good. It was against Alexander Shabali and went 5 rounds. And if you want to get a really good idea of what Usman is like against a good, tough, high-level fighter, Shabali is a really good test, and that was a really good display over the 5 rounds. Before that, he beat Brent Primus, no joke at all. Now that's the one that was overturned to a no contest after he popped. He beat Benson Henderson, submitted him, dropped him with that question mark kick that I mentioned, and then finished him. I think it was a rear naked choke, wasn't it? On the ground. So that was all in the first round. So he's had a really good run over the last couple of years. And of course, before that, he beat Patricky Pitbull to lay claim to the belt. As for Paul Hughes, I mean, I've just mentioned the last couple of fights he's had since leaving Cage Warriors, and we're gonna wind back just a little bit further, before the PFL and Bellator fights over the past year, and the first round finish of Fabiano Silva last April. I mean, I was there cage side, and he just unleashed a barrage of weapons on Fabiano Silva, who had something close to 50 professional fights and had rarely been finished, and Paul got him out of there pretty comfortably in the first round. Prior to that, took out Jan Quay Hagens with a beautiful check left hook. I believe Jan Quay Hagens is a lot better than maybe Irish fans got to see of him that night, because outside of that performance or that fight, he has looked sensational over the last couple of years. So that win is going to stand up very well. And before that, of course, he got the win over Jordan Vucenic when he absolutely beat the brakes off him in the rematch. Now, you'll remember a couple of years prior to that, back in December of 2020, he got his only loss, and that was at the hands of Jordan Vucenic in a split decision. I haven't watched that fight since, but I remember at the time my overriding feeling at the end was he was very unlucky with the decision. So I mean, I'll have to watch it back again just to be sure on that, but that's how I remember feeling at the time. And if that is the case, I mean, if that was a fight that he should have won, then he could ostensibly be sitting here going into this fight unbeaten too. So I think the fact that he's not going in unbeaten and Nurmagomedov is what's maybe giving Nurmagomedov that air of superiority. He's got the Nurmagomedov name, the mystique, but we saw Umar come in with that last week, didn't we, against Merab? And, you know, Merab proved that, you know, these guys are human, and if you come in with the right game plan, the right approach, and you're good enough, you can beat them. So, I mean, this is going to be very, very, very tough. But I think after me watching what Paul Hughes did to AJ McKee in October, I don't think I'd ever be picking against him again. I think I'd be leaning toward Paul Hughes. I think the fight IQ, he might just have enough in his toolbox to find a way to get the victory here. And that's kind of, you know, listen, I'm a fan, and first and foremost, I know the guy, and I've seen the guy fight close up. I've seen the guy fight close up. I've seen what he can do. I've seen what his mentality is like. And, you know, I would like to see him take this further now. I'd like to see him get a hold of this belt. And as for that belt, that's a Bellator lightweight title. I think it's actually being contested for this weekend. I know they're saying the brand is dead, Bellator is dead and whatnot. This belt is still being listed as the Bellator lightweight title. Now, there's no absolute confirmation of what happens to that title afterwards, but from what I have heard, what I believe is going to happen is the winners, or the people who are holding the Bellator titles after this weekend, will be confirmed then as the official PFL world champions. And then the people who are fighting, this is what Don Davis said when he was speaking, was it with Mike Heck or Mike Bone? I can't remember which one it was he was on with, but he said last week, he said the people who win then the global tournaments will be like the tournament winners, but they will not be, you know, the PFL champions. So I believe what's going to happen is this will be the last person to ever win a Bellator title. Paul Hughes could walk away and be that person, and then he would automatically become the PFL lightweight champion. And I mean, the avenues that's going to open up for him going forward, what that'll do for his standing in the world of mixed martial arts, it's insane. You got to look at the UFC division right now and the age categories that the vast majority of the top 15 fighters in the UFC lightweight division are. I think it's like, is it 10 of them or something like that is over the age of 30? And I mean, quite a way over the age of 30. And then you've got Nurmagomedov and Paul Hughes here, I think age 26 and 27. So these guys, I think I saw Andy Hickey posting this on Twitter or X, and he was saying like in a couple of years that these guys are going to be probably ranked as two of the greatest lightweights in the world. And for me, I think they're well on their way, and we are in for a treat this weekend when this fight comes around. I cannot wait for this main event. Moving on, we are going to look at the co-main event, a heavyweight contest taking place over 3 rounds between former Bellator light heavyweight champion Vadim Nemkov, and he's going in there against Tim Johnson, who was in the UFC way back when. Johnson in his 29th professional fight. So records here, we've got Nemkov at 18-2. We have Tim Johnson 18-10. Now, it's a heavyweight fight. This is the second heavyweight fight for Vadim Nemkov. He was the light heavyweight champion in Bellator. I'm just going to pull up his record here just so I get the sequence of events right, because he walked away. He relinquished this belt because he wanted to move up and challenge for the heavyweight title. So yes, he won the light heavyweight title when he knocked out Ryan Bader, second round of their fight back in 2020, defended against Phil Davis with a decision win the following year. Later that year, he submitted Julius Anglicas at Bellator 268. Then there was the fight with Corey Anderson. Now that ended prematurely. It ended up being a no contest. I think, was it an eye poke or a groin shot? It was one or the other, and Anderson couldn't continue, and that was the end of the fight. So they did eventually have that fight then in November of 2022, and Nemkov beat Corey Anderson by decision and defended the belt yet again, and then came back June the following year and beat Yoel Romero to defend the belt for a fourth time. So it was at that point that he made the announcement that he was relinquishing the title, vacating the belt, and wanted to move up to heavyweight. And his aim then was to become a two-weight world champion. Now, he had one fight at heavyweight, and that was in February of last year. He took on Bruno Capoloza in the PFL versus Bellator Bellator card. Now, this was a really interesting fight. So he came in and he weighed in, I think it was 238 pounds. So moving up from light heavyweight. He looked very, very good. But the thing that stood out to me most was that he carried his speed advantage up. And this can happen when you move up in weight classes. We saw Max Holloway go up and fight Justin Gaethje in the lightweight division. And he looked like he came in there with a bit of a speed advantage. We then saw him go back down to featherweight against Ilia Topuria. And he didn't have that speed advantage anymore. So when you go up in the weight classes, if you can maintain the speed, the explosivity and reaction times, it can bode well, you know. I mean, what you lose in size and strength, sometimes you maybe gain in other areas. Now, against Bruno Capelozzi, he looked very, very good. Capelozzi weighed in something similar to him. Let me pull it up here now. I think it was literally, it might have even been lighter than him. Because heavyweight is a broad spectrum, isn't it? 205 to 265. So Nemkov, weighed in at 238.1, and his opponent Capelozzi weighed in at 236.2. This is quite significant because Tim Johnson has been weighing in at the 265 pound limit in all of his fights. So this is a different kind of beast than Capelozzi, who is the only heavyweight that Nemkov has faced so far. Now, Nemkov looked excellent, like I said there. He's very light on his feet. He has really good footwork, very nimble. He was able to get in and out, land his shots. His jab looked really good. He'd get in, land the jab with his head off the centre line and be back out again, and he just wasn't there to be caught. And, that was a real advantage for him. He will have that speed advantage and more now against Tim Johnson. If you watch Tim Johnson fight, Tim Johnson is big and heavy and lumbering. He throws those shots much, much slower than his opponent Nemkov does. So there's going to be a massively noticeable differential in their speed. So that's one thing to look out for. But the other issue with it is if Johnson bites down on his gum shield and throws hell for leather and just lands one, then it could be lights out for Nemkov. Now, the other factor that's going on with this fight is Nemkov is doing interviews this week and he's saying that this is the final fight on his contract with the PFL. Now, he hasn't decided, or he hasn't announced whether he will be moving on or whether he'll be re-signing. He says he's not opposed to re-signing. So I think, like the other champions, I think he's maybe got some concerns about the likes of, activity and things like that. Nice warm cup of tea here, guys. We're in the midst of storm, what is it, AO, whatever it's called, the big storm in Ireland, so I can hear the wind blowing outside, and I'm sitting here enjoying a nice cup of tea and talking you guys through these fights. So he's going to get through this fight, and I believe he'll have enough to beat Tim Johnson, but free agency is interesting at this time. I mean, when you look at the light heavyweight and heavyweight divisions in the UFC, opportunity could be awaiting there too, I mean, I don't know if the UFC have shown any interest yet, but by God, they should. I mean, you look at what's happening there with John Jones. Now, John Jones talking of retirement. Will he, won't he fight Tom Aspinall? If he does anyone think that he's going to stay around and fight other guys too? I don't think so. The signs haven't been going that way. And then there's, of course, the possibility that he doesn't fight him at all. So, I mean, Aspinall is there, and you look at the rest of the division, it's like, who's standing out as the guy to maybe, be next in line? And if Nemkov was to kind of come into the UFC, pick up one or two impressive wins, you might just have a new challenger there for that UFC heavyweight belt. And again, the light heavyweight division in the UFC, I mean, you look at Alex Pereira and... I don't know, I'd like to see Nemkov kind of get back in there and provide him with another test too, because he's starting to kind of clean out that division a little bit too. And if he gets through this upcoming one against Ankalaev, we'll be looking for his next opponent, and we'll be looking back at the guys he's already beaten. So it's an interesting fight this weekend. Like I said, I would heavily favour Nemkov due to his speed advantage, his boxing, his precision, his footwork. But anything can happen in these heavyweight fights. So interesting one. We move on then to the middle of the card, the third last of the 5 main card fights, and Ireland's own Nathan Kelly, the fighting pride of the north side. Nathan Kelly back again. What a run this kid's on. 11 fight win streak. Coming in at 11-2, and he's fighting Magomedov, who's 10-1. Now, Magomedov lost his last fight just under a year ago. I think it was March last year. So he hasn't been in action since, and he's looking to come back in against Nathan and maybe get back to winning ways. Nathan's been a bit more active in that time frame. He's had a couple of fights within the last year and a couple of first round finishes too. Like I mentioned, Nathan's 11-2, lost his opening 2 pro bouts, realised he wasn't a bantamweight, moved up to the featherweight, and now he's won 11 in a row. And there's a hell of a lot of first round finishes in there, you know, with both submissions and knockouts as well. I mean, look at his record there, 5 submissions and 4 knockouts. This is a skilled fighter. I know Nathan from the jiu-jitsu scene way back when. I think I vaguely remember rolling with him when he was a teenager and we were blue belts. So he is around a hell of a long time, and he's had, like I mentioned, a really good year. December 2023, he got that first round rear naked choke in Dublin against Dimitri Solomais. Then Bellator Champions Series, I think this one was in Belfast, wasn't it, in March last year. He got that beautiful elbow finish over Vikash Singh Ruhil, and sensational, a second first round submission in a row. And then he got another one in June, that ninja choke against Jose Sanchez. Now that Jose Sanchez fight showed us something interesting. Jose Sanchez came out and got on the front foot, and he was a big, strong, burly guy at the weight, and he got on the front foot and he tried to make Kelly push him back to the fence. Kelly wasn't having it. He used his lateral footwork well, and he will need to use that here in this fight against Magomedov, because that's exactly what Magomedov brings to the table. He likes to pressure guys. He likes to get in their faces. Relies very, very heavily on his grappling. So, we'll see what Kelly can do here. And he might find there's times he's against the fence. And, when Sanchez did get him to the fence, he snuck in that ninja choke. So he's dangerous there. But his takedown defense is going to be tested. I believe he'll have too much. He's a bit more of a well-rounded fighter. But this Magomedov guy is a tough test. He's been in there with some really good guys. They've tried to match him with Kai Kamaka a couple of times, which kind of shows his level, So big test for Nathan Kelly. I believe if he gets through this one, given that they've been using his face in the promos that they released for their world tournaments, I think in the last week or two, I believe a win here maybe puts him in a position to step into that tournament. And it was very interesting to hear him on the El Triangle this week too, because he was, being a bit more confident and saying that he just realises how good he is now, and he should be calling for things. He's seeing what Paul Hughes is getting, because Paul Hughes is going in there and telling the PFL, this is who I want, this is what I want. Nathan Kelly is in a position where he can do that too, and I really love to see that in fighters. One thing I hate is seeing fighters step into their post-fight interview, and then when it's like Mackenzie Dern did it the other week after winning the first main event of the year. Okay, Mackenzie, what would you like next? I don't really mind. Whatever the UFC want to give me. Like, what are you doing? You're just giving them an excuse to just leave you on ice or just hand you a match that's going to get you nowhere. You need to bang that drum. Paul Hughes did it after he beat AJ McKee. They asked him what he wanted next, and he said, I know, we all know what we want next. We want Ireland v Dagestan #2, and we should do it in Dubai. And look where he is this weekend. I mean, that's crazy. You got to visualize these things. You got to open your mouth. You got to talk. You got to say it. Closed mouths do not get fed. You have to make these things happen. And Nathan Kelly is realising that now, because you can stay on this track that he himself and Dara Kelly and Kieran Clark are on, where they're just winning fight after fight after fight after fight and not really moving too far forward each time. No, you got to make sure, if you feel confident enough that you are ready to take on anybody and everybody, you got to pick who you're going to call out, and you got to make that happen. Force the PFL's hand. He's got it there. And if he wins again this weekend, if he were to get another finish, a first round finish, my goodness, I mean, the world could be that kid's oyster, and I believe he has just all the talent to do it. He's well able to push himself into that upper echelon, the PFL featherweight division. 2 more fights we have on the main card, one of them featuring an Irishman again. So Ibragimov is 8-0, fighting out of Manchester top team and training over in Dagestan for this one. He is fighting Ireland's Kenny Mokhonoana, and this is a tough fight for Kenny Mokhonoana. So Ibra is a really, really highly touted prospect. I have heard Dan Hardy talk about him over and over again, how he believes that he is such a sensational prospect. Like I said, 8-0, he's only 20 years old. He's had 2 fights in the PFL. He came in and he absolutely steamrolled Josh Reed in his debut. Got that first round finish. Let me just pull up the record here so that I get the correct names for his opponents. Yes, that debut against Josh Reed, he got the arm triangle in 50 seconds. So that was, we got a short glimpse of what he's about there. And then the Nacho Campos fight later in the year in October, that was of course on the Battle of the Giants card in Saudi Arabia. 3 solid rounds under the belt, but he showed that he can kind of maintain that intensity. He brings a brilliant wrestling, submission wrestling, grappling skill set to the table here. There's a lot of finishes, and I talked to him about this. He was 8-0 as an amateur, and now he's 8-0 as a pro. And when he was an amateur, I'll just pull it up here, it's 1 finish he had throughout his whole amateur career. And then, when he goes pro, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 finishes out of 8. So the longer rounds suit the style like that. You get a little bit longer to cook your opponent before forcing them into an error, and he's doing that quite a bit. We're seeing him catching some submissions here later on in rounds. He's even got some early TKO finishes too. He's a real threat, this kid. And Kenny's last fight was it last year? I believe it was a year ago, and he's been out of action since, inactivity. He got that loss to Josh O'Connor. It's longer. It's September 2023. Parted ways with Bellator, and he tested free agency, but for one reason or another, it just didn't work out for him. He couldn't get the fights, couldn't get things over the line, and here he is back now with a great opportunity in front of him, but I believe he's in for a very, very difficult night. The path to victory is what I'm concerned about for Kenny. I don't see his path to victory here. So the vast majority of his victories, he won his first 5 professional bouts, the vast majority of them coming by submission, 4 of them by submission and 1 by ground and pound. And then, I'm looking back through his amateur career, submissions over like the Leon Hill, submission over Mantis Smaley's, submission over Jack Hamill, there's Darce chokes, there's Kimuras, there's triangles, a lot of submission wins, rear naked chokes. It's not going to be easy to implement that kind of skill set against someone like Ibragimov, and I'd hope that he does it. I would love to see all the Irish fighters win this weekend, but I think he's probably the one out of the bunch. Paul has a massively tough fight, but I think outside of him, if you're looking at the other 3 Irish guys in the card, he's the one who has maybe the toughest opponent of them all. So hope you win it, Kenny, but I think Ibra's coming into this one as a favourite, and maybe rightly so. So there's one more fight then on the card, and it's the main card opener between another Dagestani fighter, Renat Khavalov, unbeaten at 8-0, and he is coming in to face Brazil's Cleaver Fernandes. I've watched a little bit of both of these guys. Renat, good southpaw, heavy wrestling, strong, just really good, really accomplished, brings what you would expect a solid young Dagestani bantamweight to bring, and he's going to be a problem. He has been around, let's see, what promotions has he fought in? It's UAE Warriors, and he had 4 fights in Eagle FC, or was it 2 fights? Yeah, but he's been finishing a lot of guys and whatnot. No submissions on his record, but out of his 8-0 on his record, 6 KO or TKO victories. So he brings pressure and he knows how to put guys away. Now his opponent Cleaver Fernandes 9-1. I think the level that he's been fighting at maybe isn't the same as the level that his opponent Khavalov has been fighting at, and I think that might show this weekend. He fights with a very heavy jiu-jitsu flavour to his game, and I watched one fight where he pulled deep half guard, which you can't really do at a decent level in MMA. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, and I love all of these things, but they're brilliant for when you're playing a game of jiu-jitsu. When you're fighting somebody, you do it against these low-level guys on regional promotions. His last fight was on Centurion, that's out in Malta, and that's as sketchy a regional promotion as there is. No doubt about it. He was a champion in Shootout Brazil, which is a decent standard, and fought a couple of guys there with kind of decent records. But then, a lot of the victories he's had is over guys who just have a couple of fights to their names, and not massively experienced. Likes to dive on leg locks. I've seen him just staying on the ground and inverting and going for things. And like I said, against fighters of a certain caliber and aptitude, you'll maybe get away with that. But once you move up to the big leagues like he's doing this weekend, it could be a tough night for Cleaver Fernandes. So if you're throwing a few quid on some fights this weekend, Khavalov might be worth a shot. I don't know what the betting lines are, but I would certainly be picking him to win that one. Outside of that, then we're on to the preliminary card, and I'm not really going to dive too much into this because I'll be honest here, I don't know a hell of a lot about some of these guys. Quite a handful of them have come off the PFL MENA series. They had a couple of fights on it this year. If Shawnee were here with me, he would be able to shed a bit more light on some of these guys. One or two that I do know is Tariq Suleiman, who is the guy that Will Fleury beat to win the UAE Warriors middleweight title there 2 years ago. So he's a decent standard fighter, coming in at 13-8, and he's got a middleweight fight against Ahmed Sami. So one to look out for there. I think he's the featured bout actually on the prelims, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he is. And then just the third fight of the prelims, early-ish on in the card, Ireland's own John Mitchell, the Cork Horsebox. Big shout out to John. Was chatting to him in the lead up to this one. I know the lads were also talking to him on the L Triangle this week. What a guy, what a fighter. I mean, I think he's just fierce underrated. The fact that he's maybe not in Ireland, and he's a little bit out of thought, out of mind, and or out of sight, out of mind, should I say. That might be kind of why, but he's an excellent fighter, 9-2, and you look at one of those defeats on his record. Really, really good fight against Jakub Kazuba. He went in there kind of sick. He had, like he said himself, he had a good round in him after a heavy staph infection, and he almost won that fight. And then it went south in the second round, obviously, and things didn't work out. But Jakub Kazuba has gone on then to prove again this year by winning the European tournament just how good he is. So I mean, there's absolutely no shame in having a loss to Jakub Kazuba. And then prior to that, he'd been on a hell of a run. So I'm very, very interested to see how John Mitchell does here. I mean, I remember him from way back in the amateur scene, and a win over, I'm looking at his amateur record here, 2019 over Kenny Mokhonoana, who's on the card. 2 wins over him actually, 2018 and 2019. It beat a teammate of mine, Ivan Blanito, I remember, at Cage Legacy 3 down in Cork. I had a grappling match on that card myself. Elliot Levi, a really tough fighter as well. The Cage Legacy Fight Night back in 2017. He's been in there with some really good guys, an experienced fighter. I think he has more than enough. I watched one fight of his opponent, Suhail Tahiri, a French guy, and he looks a good, accomplished fighter. Decent level of experience. He's coming in at 7-5-1, but I just don't think he'll have enough for John Mitchell. I think John Mitchell will be well able to hang with him anywhere that he wants. If he wants to stand and strike with this guy, I think he's better than him. And if he wants to get a hold of this guy, I think he looks physically more threatening and imposing than this guy. So I believe John Mitchell is he would probably, out of all the Irish fighters, be my lock for getting a win this weekend. Like I said, Kenny Mokhonoana has a very, very tough fight, as does Nathan Kelly, and Paul just has a huge roadblock in front of him, but I believe he has all the tools to get the job done. So that's the card, guys. That's the card. It's been confirmed that in Ireland it's being shown on DAZN, which is fantastic news. So don't have to get a VPN and take a flight to another country to watch the fights. Fantastic stuff. And obviously the really good news as well is that the main card for us in Ireland starts at 4 p.m. So no staying up all night, and I'm here for it, because even the following week we've got the UFC card in Saudi Arabia, and that's going to be kind of a reasonable hour for us too when we're on our European timeline. So yeah, very, very excited. This is a big weekend, particularly for Irish MMA, and I'm all for it. So I can't wait to see the fights. Hope you guys enjoy the fights this weekend. Have a good one, and I will see you next week.